The Texas sun beat down like God's own wrath, scorching the red earth until it cracked and splintered like a dying thing, somewhere between nowhere and hell. Elias McGraw dug his own grave. He was knee-deep in the dust when the first sign of life he'd seen in 3 years stepped out of the heat shimmer. But before that, there was only him, the shovel, and the silence. Elias wasn't a man of many words anymore. Didn't need 'em, not since the fever took Jenny and the boys. It came quick, stole their breath, their smiles, left behind nothing but a rickety house full of echoes and that cold, mean ache in his chest that no amount of whiskey could drown. So he dug, one scoop, then another. The earth gave easy, like it agreed with him, like it wanted him gone. He'd spent 3 hours in that hole already, sweat soaking his shirt, dripping from the brim of a worn-out hat. The grave was 6 feet deep and still didn't feel deep enough. He figured if a man was going to lay himself to rest, might as well make it proper. Nearby, a crooked wooden cross waited. It read, "Here lies a man who gave up." No name, no date, just the truth. Elias had carved it with the same knife he'd once used to whittle toys for his boys. Funny how things turned out. He paused to catch his breath, wiped his face with a dirt-caked sleeve. The horizon danced under the heat, blurred and flickering. The wind didn't blow here. Not really. Just whispered sometimes, like it was too tired to do more. He leaned on the shovel, bones aching, soul heavier. He thought about Jenny, her laugh in the mornings, the way she'd touch his arm without saying anything, just to remind him she was there. Gone now, all gone. The grave seemed to call him, like a warm bed after a hard day's ride. Then the light shifted. Elias squinted, blinked twice, thought maybe he'd gotten too much sun. But no, a shadow moved across the rim of the grave. Then another. Then 3 more. He straightened up, hand dropping to his hip out of habit. The revolver was still there, dusty but loaded. 5 small figures stood against the burning sky, the sun behind them making halos out of dirt and tangle-haired silhouettes. Children, girls, maybe, couldn't tell at first. Their dresses were torn, stained with sweat and something darker. One held a ragged doll, its head dangling by a thread. The tallest might have been 13 or 14. The smallest looked barely 6. Damn. Elias muttered, "This ain't right." The oldest stepped forward, her face streaked with grime but her eyes steady. She spoke, voice calm but hoarse. "Mister, we need help." Elias stared at her like she'd spoken in tongues. His lips parted, but no words came. He hadn't seen another soul in 3 years. Not one. The nearest town was 15 miles through desert that could kill a man with boots and a canteen. These kids had no horses, no packs, no hats. "How the hell did you get here?" he finally asked, the gravel in his voice startling even him. "We walked," she said, 2 days. Through that, he pointed behind them. Nothing but heat and death out there. She nodded once. We didn't have a choice. He felt something twist inside, something he thought had died the day Jenny did, but he pushed it down. Couldn't afford to feel. Not anymore. "You can't stay," he said. "Ain't safe." "We know," she replied, glancing at the half-dug grave. "We saw something. They're coming." "Who's coming? The men from the orphanage?" He narrowed his eyes. "You mean they're chasing you?" She nodded. "They said we saw too much." That's when Elias noticed the bruises, the cuts, the way the little one clutched the doll like it was her last piece of the world. His jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors about places like that, places where kids went and didn't come back. Places run by men who smiled for judges and beat the innocent behind locked doors. You're telling me they're going to kill you? Yes, sir. The smallest girl started crying, a sound so raw it cut through him like a knife. The older girl knelt beside her, murmuring words of comfort, arms tight around her sisters like a mother with no childhood left. And then Elias saw the dust on the horizon, a cloud, rising fast, horses. The girl saw it too. Her face went pale. They found us. Elias looked from the approaching riders to the 5 little girls standing beside the grave he'd meant to die in. Something inside him, something old and scarred and near forgotten, rose up like a beast coming out of hibernation. He could still walk away. Let the riders take them. Climb back into that hole and finish what he started. Or he turned, picked up his shovel, not to dig anymore. He handed it to the girl. Go behind the house. There's a root cellar, hidden door under the wagon. Get in. Stay quiet. She looked at him, wide-eyed. But I'll deal with them. You don't even know our names. I don't need to. He watched them disappear behind the old house just as the hoofbeats reached the gate. Then he turned to face the men who'd come to drag children back to hell. The sun blazed above, but Elias McGraw didn't feel the heat anymore. He was no longer digging a grave. He was standing between innocence and evil, and for the first time in 3 years, he wanted to live. They huddled beneath the earth, in the shadowy root cellar behind the old wagon, the air thick with dust and silence. 5 little girls, covered in grime, sweat, and blood. Their backs pressed against the cold stone wall while Elias McGraw stood above, shotgun in hand, listening for hoofbeats. The world outside burned in silence, but down there, it was a different kind of fire. The oldest girl, Sadie Harper, kept her arms wrapped around the littlest one. Millie, Lila, June, and Tessa sat close, knees to chests, eyes wide and haunted. Their bodies bore the marks of survival bruises, cuts, sunburn, and something deeper, an invisible weight that clung to them like shadow. Tell me what happened, Elias said, crouching at the cellar door, voice low and steady. And don't lie. Not to me. Sadie hesitated, then nodded. We were in the basement, she said, her voice brittle as dry grass. That's where they kept the sick ones, and the ones who didn't listen. Elias's jaw clenched. It was just supposed to be another night. Sadie continued, staring at the dirt floor. Millie had a nightmare. Happens a lot. So I got up to find her water. She looked down at the small girl, whose eyes were closed but whose tiny fingers clutched her doll so tight her knuckles had turned white. We heard voices in the hall. Sadie went on. Not like the usual ones. These were different. There was a woman there. She was yelling. Yelling about what Elias asked. She said she was going to report everything. Said she had proof names, dates. She was talking about missing kids, kids who never made it out. Elias felt his stomach turn. She called out one name, Beth. Sadie said, looking toward June. She remembered her. Said she came to visit 2 months ago, and Beth told her everything. June nodded slowly, her bottom lip trembling. She said she was going to take us away, all of us. And then Elias asked, voice tight. Then Mr. Holloway came down the stairs. That name made something harden in Elias's chest. Baron Judd Holloway. He'd heard it before, owned a freight company, 2 cattle outfits, and half the politicians in 3 counties. But he also ran charitable homes for orphans, the kind nobody asked too many questions about. He told the woman she was trespassing. Sadie said, told her she had no idea what kind of trouble she was in. Then he hit her. She swallowed, eyes glassy. She fell. She was screaming. And then she wasn't. No one spoke for a long beat. Millie whimpered. Elias reached for the canteen and passed it down. Sadie made sure her sisters each drank. We didn't mean to see it. Sadie whispered. We just wanted water, but he saw us. Holloway did. Elias looked her in the eye. He see your faces. She nodded. He didn't say anything, just looked, cold, like we weren't even people. What happened next? He sent men after us. Sadie said they tore her room apart, found her bag, but not the journal. She'd hidden it in her boot. I took it. You got it. Still, Sadie reached into the folds of her dress, pulling out a small leather-bound book. Elias took it carefully, flipping through pages covered in neat handwriting, names, dates, transactions, even payments. His hands trembled. This is evidence, he muttered. This is a damn ledger of hell. Sadie's voice broke. She said, if something happened to her, to find anyone who wasn't part of it, and you chose me. Elias said softly. Sadie nodded. You're the only man in Miles who ain't on his payroll. We heard stories about you, that you left the world behind, that you lost everything. He chuckled bitterly. Ain't much of a reason to trust a man. It's the only reason that matters. Sadie said. Lila spoke up, her voice tiny. They're gonna kill us, aren't they? Elias looked at the bruises on her arms, at the cuts on Tessa's hands, at the burn on Millie's shoulder, half-healed and raw. No, he said, steady as bedrock, not while I'm breathing. Sadie blinked. Why would you help us? You don't know us. Elias took a long breath. 3 years ago, I buried my whole family. Fever took 'em fast. I stood right here, not 2 feet from where you're sitting, and I swore to never care again. World broke me. I let it. He met Sadie's eyes. But you kids, you done walked through hell, and you still fightin'. That means something. Footsteps sounded above. A horse snorted. Someone was out there. Elias lowered the door slowly, locking the latch from the inside. Stay quiet, he whispered. No matter what. Sadie reached out, gripped his arm. They got papers, she said, legal ones. They'll say we're thieves, that we're runaways. I've dealt with liars before. She nodded, eyes wide with worry. They won't stop. Elias stood, the journal tucked into his vest, his shotgun in hand. Neither will I. He climbed out, sealing the door, heart thundering like the hoofbeats closing in, and in the dark. 5 girls clung to one another, not just for warmth, but for hope that somewhere in this God-forsaken land, there was still one man left who'd choose right over safe. The silence didn't last long, not out here, not with death riding hard from the east. Elias McGraw stood behind his house, eyes narrowed at the dust cloud swirling in the distance. Riders, 4, maybe 5, coming fast, not frantic, controlled, like men used to getting what they wanted without asking twice. He felt it in his bones. These weren't lawmen looking for lost children. These were men who already knew exactly where the children were. His hand hovered near his hip, where his revolver rested, worn but oiled, loaded. He turned and walked to the front yard. Slow and steady. Let them see a man with nothing to hide. Let them believe that lie, if only for a little while. They came over the ridge like wolves, 4 men on horseback, dusty coats, clean guns. One wore a badge that glittered under the sun. Deputy Cole Vance. Elias recognized him instantly. Vance was known across the county a lawman in title only, a hired gun for the highest bidder. In truth, that bidder, more often than not, was Baron Holloway. The horses snorted as they slowed near the fence. Vance gave Elias a practiced smile, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. "Afternoon," he called out, tipping his hat. "Name's Vance, deputy out of Caldwell." Elias didn't move. "Don't get many visitors. We're looking for some girls," Vance said. "Runaways, dangerous ones." Elias felt something inside him bristle. "Dangerous," he echoed. "Looking to arrest a bunch of kids? Not just kids." Another rider cut in. Before Vance could stop him, "Witnesses." Vance shot the man a sharp look, then turned back to Elias. "You see any girls passing through here?" Mr. Elias kept his voice level. "Ain't seen a soul in days." Vance dismounted, boots thudding into the dirt. "Mind if we look around? This is private property." Vance smiled again, this time colder. "We've got jurisdiction over a 50-mile radius. You know how the law works, don't you?" Elias didn't answer. He just stepped to the side, giving a nod toward the house. "Look all you want." Inside, under the floorboards, 5 girls sat in darkness, trusting a man who had every reason not to care. As Vance's men spread out, Elias watched them, noted their formations, how their hands stayed near their holsters. These weren't boys playing sheriff. These were professionals, but they underestimated him. Everyone always did. One man moved toward the back. Elias's gut tightened. He needed to decide, right now, let them find the girls and maybe save himself, or fight, go back to war, to kill or die. He thought of Sadie's eyes, steady with fear, of little Millie calling him sir, her tiny voice shaking. Then he thought of the cross by the grave. Here lies a man who gave up. He clenched his jaw. Not today. He turned, walked to the grave, and picked up the shovel again, started filling in the hole, slow, deliberate. Vance strolled over. "What you buryin'?" "McGraw." Elias didn't stop. "Dead horse." Vance sniffed the air. "Don't smell like no horse." "Maybe your nose is broke." Tension crackled. Elias felt it rise like lightning in his blood. His fingers itched for the pistol. His breath came slow, controlled. Behind him, a rider shouted, "Nothing back there." Vance's smile slipped. "Funny. 5 girls crossed 2 days of desert, and they just vanish. I guess God took 'em." Vance stepped closer. Too close. His hand brushed the grip of his revolver. "You're making a mistake. McGraw." Elias looked up. "No, son, you are." The movement was lightning quick. Elias dropped the shovel, hand snapping to his hip, revolver clearing leather just as Vance's eyes widened. But he didn't shoot. Not yet. Vance froze. The other riders tensed, their hands twitching toward weapons. "I got 5 shots," Elias said, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "4 of you. I don't miss." The men didn't move, not a muscle. "I walked back inside," Elias continued, "and you forget this place exists, or we start a war right here." A beat passed. Then another. The rider to Vance's left blinked, swallowed hard. Vance raised his hand slowly, like a man humoring a lunatic. "Easy, friend," he said. "We ain't looking for trouble." "Too late," Elias said. Another long pause. Vance finally nodded to his men. "Mount up." They turned, slow, deliberate, climbing back onto their horses. Vance lingered, eyes burning into Elias's. "You think you're protecting those girls? You think you're some hero now?" Elias didn't flinch. "I think you should start riding." Vance bared his teeth. "This ain't over. McGraw, Holloway's coming, and next time we bring 20, then you best bring coffins." Vance wheeled his horse around. The riders kicked up dust as they left. Elias stood there a long time, heart hammering in his chest, revolver still warm in his hand. He'd made his choice. He wasn't climbing back into that grave. Not today. The wind had shifted. It always did before something went bad. Elias McGraw stood by the front porch, leaning against a post, a weathered mug of cold coffee in hand. His revolver hung at his hip like a secret he didn't need to advertise. The sun was high, the sky clear, but the air it felt tight, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to scream or hold its breath. Then the riders came back, same 4 men, this time slower, colder, meaner. Deputy Cole Vance led the way, his horse trotting in a circle before settling to a halt 20 feet from Elias. His badge caught the sun like a sneer. The others fanned out, subtle-like, forming a loose triangle around the house. Elias didn't move, just sipped his coffee. "Morning again," Vance called out. "You call this a morning?" Elias said. "Sun ain't even right yet. Had ourselves a restless night," Vance replied, voice too casual. "Kept wondering why a man like you'd lie to us." Elias stared. Unreadable. "I didn't lie. Told you I hadn't seen any kids." Vance smiled. "You said you hadn't seen anyone, which, technically, could mean you heard 'em." Elias didn't blink. "What's your point?" Vance dismounted, real slow, as if he had all the time in the world. He walked forward, boots crunching on the dirt. The air got tighter. "We got a new warrant," he said, waving a paper like it meant something. "Signed by Judge Toller, covers all properties within 25 miles, gives us full access." He stepped closer, to search, question, confiscate, if necessary. Elias raised an eyebrow. "That judge, he still owes Holloway for that campaign donation." "Right," Vance's smile faded just a shade. "I'd watch how I talk about public officials." McGraw. Elias shrugged. "Don't see any public here. Just you," from the corner of his eye. He saw one of the riders slide toward the barn. Another circled the well. "Don't get many visitors," Elias said. "Place is real quiet. Too quiet, maybe," Vance muttered. He nodded to his men. They split off, one toward the chicken coop, one toward the back of the house. Elias stepped forward, slow and calm, placing himself between Vance and the door. "Be careful where you walk," he said. Vance chuckled. "You threatening an officer just saying this land don't like strangers." Inside, beneath the floorboards of the back bedroom, 5 girls lay still as stone, their breath shallow. Sadie held Millie tight, her hand over the little one's mouth. She could hear footsteps above, boots on old wood, moving slow, calculating. June whimpered. Tessa pressed her fingers together, silently praying. Lila clutched the small knife Elias had left behind just in case. Outside, Vance turned toward the house. "I'm going in," he said. "Suit yourself," Elias replied, stepping aside. "Mind the step, it creaks." The deputy pushed open the door and walked inside, eyes sharp, nose twitching like a bloodhound. He moved through the front room, then the kitchen, touched things. Sniffed the air, smells like soap. He muttered, "Had company last week," Elias said from behind him. "Neighbor's boy. Smelled worse than a hog pen. Figured I'd clean up." Vance opened the pantry, peered inside. Empty. He moved toward the back. Elias's voice dropped. "Don't open that door." Vance froze. "Why not rats?" Elias said. "Big ones. Took out a hen last week. Been thinking of dynamite in the damn cellar." Vance turned, eyebrows raised. That so Elias didn't blink. That so. They stared at each other for a moment too long. Then Vance smiled again. "Well, rats or not, I gotta do my job." He reached for the latch and stopped. "Funny thing," he said. "You got fresh footprints all around your water barrel. Small ones. Foxes." Elias lied. "Foxes wear boots." Elias shrugged. "Times are hard. Even wildlife's getting fancy." A voice called from outside. "Nothing in the barn. Another coop's empty, too." Vance hesitated, then let go of the latch. He turned, walked back toward Elias. "You're a hard man to read," he said. "That's the idea. You wouldn't happen to be protecting someone, would you?" Elias didn't answer. Vance leaned in, voice low. "Here's what I think. McGraw, I think you got those girls hidden somewhere. I think you're making a big mistake. You could have walked away clean. But now you're in it." Elias met his eyes, slow and steady. "You think what you want. Just remember, folks round here still talk about what I did back at Yellow Creek. Those boys never found their boots." Vance stared, then smirked. "You ain't scared of me?" "Nope. You should be." Elias smiled. Cold, final. "You should be scared of what's coming if you touch one of those girls." The deputy stepped back, tipped his hat, turned toward the door. "We'll be back." Elias didn't watch them leave. He waited until the sound of hooves vanished over the ridge, until the dust settled. Then he opened the hidden cellar door. Sadie blinked up at him. "They're gone for now, but they'll be back," she said, her voice small. Elias nodded. "Next time, they won't ask. Next time, they come with fire." Millie hugged his leg. The others stared up at him like he was the last tree in a burning forest. "We have to run," Sadie whispered. Elias shook his head. "No. This ends here." Night had fallen over the Texas plain, but no one in that house slept. The fire in the hearth burned low, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. The girls sat at the table, quiet, eyes red, shoulders hunched. Even little Millie had stopped clutching her doll. She just stared at the flicker of flame like it might offer answers. Elias McGraw sat at the head of the table, the small leather journal open in front of him. Each page felt like a blade. Neat, delicate handwriting, a woman's hand, strong, disciplined. The ink had faded in places, but the words were still clear. Names, dates, destinations, payments, children. Bought, sold, transferred like cattle. Some marked as labor, others labeled private. The youngest ones had no description at all, just a price. The highest prices. The air felt colder the deeper he read. Sadie sat to his right, hands folded tight in her lap. She hadn't spoken in minutes. Neither had Elias, June whispered. "Is that her writing?" Sadie nodded slowly. "She showed me, said it had to get out, said someone needed to know what Holloway's been doing." Elias turned another page. A list of towns, institutions, charitable homes funded by companies tied to Holloway. In each one, children vanished, sometimes 2 in a month, sometimes more, each disappearance marked with initials probable buyers. He read one name and slammed the book shut, fists trembling. God help us, he muttered. What is it? Sadie asked, voice thin. Elias opened the journal again, turned it around. There it was, a name under a transaction dated just a week prior, McCall Mining Co. 3 children, secured for Site 18B. Site 18B. That was a silver mine in New Mexico, one known for cave-ins and brutal hours. No one talked about it in polite company. Everyone knew what happened to kids sent there. No one made it 6 months. Jesus, Elias whispered. He's not just taking them, he's killing them slow. Lila sniffled. Why? Because it pays. Elias said bitterly. Because monsters like Holloway don't just want power. They want silence. They buy judges, sheriffs, lawmakers, anyone who'll keep looking the other way. Sadie looked at the journal. That's why she died. Isn't it? Elias nodded. She got too close to the truth. He stared into the flames. He saw his wife's face, his boys, how they'd died helpless, while he stood powerless. And now he had a chance to do something that mattered. He stood up, the chair scraping back against the wood floor. This changes everything. Sadie looked at him. You believe us now? I believe this could burn his whole empire to the ground. He paced the room, thoughts moving like lightning. They'll kill to get it back. Not just you, me too, anyone near it. He turned to the girls. You have to understand this book. It's a bullet pointed at Holloway's heart, but it's also a target painted on our backs. Tessa asked quietly. Then what do we do? Elias paused, looked out the window, saw nothing but dark sky and silent land. We hide it. Somewhere no one can find it. June tugged on Sadie's sleeve. What if they already know we have it? Sadie looked to Elias. She's right, she said. They tore the woman's room apart. They'll come here next. They're already coming. Elias said, Vance was just the first shadow. Holloway rides at dawn. You can bet on that. He turned back to the journal, flipped through the final pages. One stood out, slipped between 2 entries. Folded, a map, drawn by hand. Crude, but clear. Markings. Trails. An X beside the words, if anything happens to me. Take this to the Capitol, Sadie said. She wanted it delivered. Elias nodded. To someone with authority. But who can we trust? She asked. The sheriff, the judge. Nomer Elias said, Not here, not in this county. He picked up the map, studied the path, maybe the federal marshal in Austin, or a newspaper man, someone who can print this for the world to see. Sadie stood, voice rising. We can't just run if we run. Holloway wins. Elias stepped toward her, voice calm but firm. I didn't say we run. I said we survive. Millie whimpered. Lila reached across the table, taking her hand. Elias took a deep breath, then another. 3 years ago, he said quietly, I buried everything I loved. I let the world break me. But you 5. He looked at each girl in turn. You gave me something back. Maybe it's just anger. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's the last part of me that ain't dead yet. He walked to the gun cabinet, opened it, took out his father's shotgun, loaded it. I don't know what happens come morning, but I know this. He held up the journal. This book. This is our war. Sadie stepped forward, Her voice was different, now clearer, stronger. "Then we fight." Elias smiled, tired and proud. "Damn right we do." The first torch hit the roof just past midnight. It didn't hiss, it roared. Flames licked across the dry shingles like they'd been waiting all year for this moment. The wood caught fast. Smoke poured into the sky. Elias McGraw was already moving. He kicked open the front door, shotgun in hand, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the porch. Shadows flickered in the firelight riders circling the property, ducking between outbuildings, creeping through the corral. 12 men, maybe more, hired guns, Holloway's best. The girls were already in position, tucked deep in the cellar beneath the bedroom, a floorboard nailed loose just enough to pop open when needed. Elias had barricaded the trap door with an old iron stove, just in case. He'd spent the last 6 hours rigging the house like a frontier fortress. Bottles of kerosene set along the windowsills, tripwire strung between porch posts, 2 scatterguns locked and loaded behind the pantry door, the root cellar packed with dried food and water. He hadn't slept, didn't plan to. The men outside shouted, laughed. One fired a shot into the air. "Come on out." McGraw, a voice boomed. "We ain't here for you. Just give us the girls and we'll make it easy." Elias ducked behind the overturned table he'd dragged in front of the window. He slid his rifle across the top, peered through a crack in the shutters. He counted 10, maybe more behind the barn. They were spread wide, using the shadows, confident, cocky. He chambered around. "Come and take 'em." A gunshot answered. The front window shattered. Splinters sprayed across the room. Elias rolled left, came up behind the stove, fired once, wide on purpose. Let 'em know he wasn't blind. Let 'em know he was ready. Another torch flew overhead. It landed near the chicken coop. That, too, burst into flame. Smoke thickened, clawing its way into the house through every crack and crevice. Elias coughed, pulled a bandana over his mouth. His heart beat hard, steady. He kicked over a chair to block the hallway, then slid down behind the bookshelf near the back door. Boot steps, crunching dirt. He saw a shape move across the yard, a man ducking behind the rain barrel. Elias fired. The man fell back with a scream, rifle clattering. Another silhouette rose behind the well. Elias shot again, missed. The return fire was deafening. Bullets tore through the wall. Plaster exploded. A painting of Jenny and the boys flew off the wall and hit the floor with a sick crack. Elias clenched his jaw. He kept low, moved fast, crawling across the floor to the other window. A bullet grazed the window frame, splinters nipping his ear. He pulled the bottle of kerosene from the shelf, lit a rag with his last match, and hurled it through the shattered front window. Fire bloomed outside. A man screamed, then silence, then more yelling. They were angry now, reckless. A shotgun blast tore through the front door, sending hinges flying. Elias dove behind the pantry, came up firing. 2 men stumbled in the doorway, one fell. The other ducked back out, bleeding from the arm. Elias's chest heaved. He'd been in shootouts before, back in the war, back in the mining camps when pay disputes turned bloody. But this was personal. This was his land, his house, his choice, and he wasn't given an inch. The wall behind him exploded. A stick of dynamite had gone off near the back of the house. Smoke rolled in. The roof groaned. He had minutes. Maybe Emma. He shouted through the floor, "Get ready!" A muffled response. He pulled the spare pistol from his boot, holstered it, grabbed the scattergun, loaded both barrels, kicked open the back door and stepped into the yard. Gunfire erupted instantly. He fired both barrels, dropped one man, sent another scrambling. The others fell back. Startled by his sudden charge, Elias dove behind the water trough as bullets pinged off the iron rim. He reloaded. Teeth clenched. His left arm throbbed from a bullet that had clipped the bicep. Blood ran into his sleeve. He didn't stop. The fire spread across the roof. Flames danced above him. Smoke curled into the sky, black as midnight sin. He peeked out. 3 men near the barn. 2 more circling from the south. He fired again, hit one in the leg. The others dove for cover. Someone shouted, "We need him alive." Holloway said no bodies that gave him pause. They weren't just here to kill. They wanted to frame him, force a confession, twist the truth into something they could use. No damn way. He moved toward the cellar hatch, pulled aside the stove, lifted the door. Sadie blinked up at him. "It's time. Go out the back, through the fence, head for the ridge, take the canyon trail. What about you? I'll buy time." She hesitated. Now he barked. They moved. Quiet, quick, just like he taught them. He watched their small bodies slip into the smoke and vanish into the dark. Then he turned. Another torch flew. It hit the roof beam. The whole damn house groaned. Time to finish this. He stood tall, shotgun in one hand, journal tucked inside his vest. As the fire roared around him, Elias McGraw stepped into the yard. 12 guns turned toward him. He didn't flinch. "You boys came looking for ghosts." He shouted, "Now you've found one." And then he fired the first shot of the last stand. Elias McGraw hit the ground hard, shoulder first, his body skidding across dirt and ash. The breath tore from his lungs in one ugly grunt. Blood soaked through his shirt, spreading fast from the wound high on his left side. The bullet hadn't passed clean, it was lodged in muscle, burning like fire, pulsing with every heartbeat. He rolled behind the broken trough, gasping, his vision swimming. Above, the night sky spun. Flames from the burning roof cast flickering shadows across the land like ghosts dancing their last waltz. Somewhere to the west, hoofbeats pounded, growing fainter. The girls had made it through the fence. He'd bought them time, but not enough. A scream ripped through the darkness, a child's scream, high, sharp, raw. Millie Sadie's voice, distant, desperate. Elias blinked, forced himself up on one elbow. Across the yard, by the smoking ruins of the barn, a lone rider held the littlest girl against his saddle. Millie kicked and squirmed, fists tiny hammers against his chest. But the man just laughed, turned his horse. Elias's stomach turned to stone. He tried to rise. His leg buckled. He hit the dirt again. God damn it! He growled, teeth grinding. The rider was turning east toward the dry creek bed. 2 others joined him. Forming a wedge around the child, they were taking her. Not to kill, not yet. To use, a hostage, insurance. His hand found the revolver. 3 bullets left, not enough. He tried to stand again, failed. Blood in his mouth now, smoke in his eyes. The pain was everywhere. And still, he reached for the rifle. In the canyon, the other girls were disappearing over the ridge, safe for now. Sadie turned back, saw Millie taken. No, she screamed. Elias saw it too, and he understood what had to be done. He couldn't walk, so he crawled, over dirt and ash and broken glass, Toward the last horse in the corral, his old mare, Dusty, tied loose, scared, but still there. He used the fence post to pull himself up, staggered forward, grabbed the saddle horn. The world tilted. His knees buckled. He bit down on a scream. Not now. He whispered, not now, with everything left in him. Elias hauled himself into the saddle. Blood ran down his side. His fingers barely held the reins. He kicked once. Dusty took off, across the yard, through smoke and flame, toward the creek bed, toward the men who had his girl. The rider with Millie was already halfway down the wash, moving fast. Elias leaned low, rifle tucked under one arm. The wind stung his eyes. The world blurred. He aimed, fired. The first shot missed. Second hit the lead man's horse in the flank. The animal screamed, bucked, threw the rider sideways. Millie tumbled, rolled across the dirt like a rag doll. Elias didn't see her get up, didn't have time. The third man turned toward him, rifle raised. Elias didn't break. He dropped the rifle, pulled the Colt from his hip, fired once. The shot took the man in the chest, but not before the rifle cracked. Elias felt the round punch into his right thigh. The impact nearly knocked him from the saddle. He gritted his teeth, screamed, stayed on. Dusty thundered down into the creek bed. Millie sat curled behind a rock, crying. The last rider turned reloading. Elias dropped from the saddle, rolled, came up on one knee, gun raised. He fired. The man jerked, fell. Silence. Only the crackle of flame in the distance. Only the wind. Elias limped forward, fell beside the child. She looked up at him, wide-eyed, tear-streaked. Uncle Elias. He touched her face, blood smearing her cheek. "Got you," he said. "Ain't nobody taking you again." She wrapped her arms around his neck, small and warm and trembling. And then Elias collapsed. The canyon narrowed fast. Walls of stone rose on either side, jagged and unforgiving, like jaws closing around prey. The trail twisted and dipped, barely wide enough for a wagon, even tighter for a man riding hurt and bleeding. Dusty galloped ahead, hooves thundering over gravel. Elias gritted his teeth, every jolt sending fire through his leg. Millie clung to his back, arms wrapped tight, face buried against his shoulder. Behind them, chaos. The sound of riders, at least 10, echoed through the rock like a thunderclap. Gunfire cracked. A bullet whined past Elias's ear and sparked off the canyon wall. He ducked low, kicked Dusty harder. This was no longer about escape. This was a chess game with blood on every square, and Holloway's killers knew the board. Elias had one advantage: they thought he was desperate. They didn't know he'd mapped every inch of this canyon over 3 years of grief and silence. He reached the split in the trail. One path curved gently east. The other climbed hard into a narrow ledge barely wide enough for a goat. He pulled right. Dusty stumbled, regained her footing, climbed. The pursuers followed, but not all. 3 men peeled off, trying to flank him through the easier path. Exactly what Elias wanted. Halfway up the ledge, he slid from the saddle, clutching Millie close, whispered, "Stay low." Then he turned and limped to the outcrop where he'd buried a small box last winter. He yanked it loose, hands shaking, and opened it. Inside, 3 sticks of dynamite, still dry. He shoved them into his satchel, lit the first with a strike match against stone, and tossed it behind them. The canyon echoed like thunder, screams, a horse crying out. Dust and stone rained from the cliff face. He grabbed Millie. "Let's move." They climbed higher. Below, the riders regrouped, smarter now, angrier. A voice shouted from the bottom. "We've got 'em trapped. They can't go much further." Another voice Holloway says, "Dead or alive, preferably dead." Elias's pulse pounded in his ears. They reached the plateau, a small flat space near the canyon rim, perfect for a last stand, or an ambush. He turned. Sadie was there. She'd circled back. Behind her, Lila, June, Tessa, all crouched behind boulders, eyes fierce, rifles clutched like lifelines. "We saw you go up the cliff," Sadie whispered. "Figured you'd need help. I told you to run. We did, and then we came back." Elias smiled. "Despite the pain, remind me to yell at you later." Below, the riders were climbing. 8 left, spreading out, no cover, no time. Elias turned to the girls. "We've got one shot." He pointed to the narrow choke between 2 rock formations. "When they hit that pass, we light 'em up." Sadie nodded. "What about you on bait?" Before she could argue, he hobbled forward, limping into view just as the lead rider reached the first bend. The man saw him, raised a rifle. Elias fired first. The bullet slammed into the man's shoulder. He screamed, dropped back. The others surged forward. That's when Sadie and the girls opened fire. The canyon turned to thunder. Rocks shattered, horses screamed, men cursed. 2 riders fell. Then came the return fire, wild and brutal. Elias ducked behind a stone pillar as bullets whined past. One clipped his hat, another grazed his arm. Still, he held position, fired again. 1 shot, 1 down, 6 left. Then he saw movement on the far ridge, 2 riders flanking left, trying to come up behind the girls. He grabbed the last stick of dynamite, lit it, threw it. The explosion rocked the ridge. Dust rose. 1 horse bolted. The other rider fell, screaming. 4 left. Close now. Too close, Sadie shouted. Out of bullets. So was Elias. He turned to the girls. "Get ready." They nodded, grim and fearless. The first gunman crested the rise, pistol raised. Then Tessa, barely 7, threw a rock the size of her head. It hit the man square in the face. He toppled backward, screaming. Another rushed in, met by Lila's boot to his ribs. He went down hard. Elias grabbed the fallen man's pistol, fired twice. 2 more dropped. Silence. Just breathing, just heartbeats. And then, the crack of a single rifle. Elias spun. Sadie stumbled, blood on her arm. "No," he roared. He spotted the shooter half hidden behind a boulder. Elias didn't think. He charged, tackled the man, fists flying. They rolled across the dirt, biting, clawing, cursing. Elias's world turned red. He headbutted the bastard, drove a knee into his gut, then crushed the man's throat with his elbow. It was over in seconds. He stood, panting, covered in dust and blood. Sadie was still standing, pale but alive. "Just a graze," she said. "I'm fine." Elias collapsed beside her. They'd done it. They'd survived, for now. But dawn was coming, and with it, Holloway himself. The sun crested the canyon wall in a smear of red and gold, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Smoke still curled from burnt rocks. Blood stained the dust. Spent shells glinted like scattered coins from hell. Elias McGraw stood near the edge, the leather-bound journal tucked tight inside his vest. His breath came shallow. Pain bloomed in his ribs and leg with every movement. He could barely lift the pistol in his hand, but his eyes, they burned, below, across the desert basin. A new dust cloud rose. Riders, dozens of them. At the front, Baron Holloway, the devil in fine leather and silver trim, sitting atop a black gelding like Caesar returning to crush rebellion. Elias turned back to the girls. Sadie was bandaging her own arm with a strip of torn skirt. June and Lila tended to Tessa's swollen ankle. Millie sat in the shadow of a boulder, holding Elias's canteen and looking smaller than ever. They all stared at him now. "What do we do?" Sadie asked. He looked at the journal, at the children, at the oncoming storm. "You run," he said. "No," Sadie whispered. "Not without you." "Yes," he said firmly. "You take that book, you ride to the Capitol, find a marshal, a judge. Hell, find a damn newspaper. They'll kill you. Maybe, but they were always gonna try." He reached into his vest, pulled out the journal, and handed it to Sadie. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "You sure?" she asked. Elias nodded. "This book doesn't just save you. It ends Holloway. All of it. Everything he built. Down in the basin. The riders fanned out, trained, disciplined. Murder in their wake. No time left." Sadie's eyes welled up. "I don't want to leave you." He put a bloody hand on her shoulder. "You saved me. Girl, you and your sisters. Now let me return the favor." She nodded, jaw clenched. No more tears, only fire. He turned to Dusty, his mare. "Tired but steady. Take them," he told the horse softly. "All the way." He helped the girls climb on, Sadie in front with the reins. The horse was small, but the girls were smaller. They'd make it. They had to. As the first shots rang out in the distance, Elias slapped Dusty's flank. "Go!" The horse bolted. The canyon swallowed them. Elias turned back to the ridge, drew his last breath full and sharp. Then he walked toward the edge with his rifle. One bullet left, behind him. Sunlight caught the barrel. Below, Holloway's voice roared McGraw. Elias stood tall. "I'm here, you son of a bitch," guns raised. He smiled and fired the final shot not at Holloway, but at the canyon wall. The dynamite charges he'd buried days before just in case erupted with thunder. The entire ridge shook, rocks collapsed, dust exploded into the sky, and Elias McGraw vanished in the roar, buried by stone and fire. But not before he bought freedom, and not before he made sure the last thing Holloway saw was a man who didn't flinch. The sky over the canyon hadn't cleared yet. Dust still hung like a curtain drawn across the sun, but through it came a new sound, a trumpet, sharp, commanding. Then the thunder of hooves, dozens of them. From the eastern trail, blue coats poured into the canyon like the tide rolling in after a long drought. U.S. Cavalry. Sabers gleaming, rifles raised. At the front rode Captain Seth Rourke, his face carved from discipline and fire. He pulled hard on the reins, his horse rearing before the broken battlefield. "Hold your fire," he bellowed, but there was no fire left. Holloway's remaining gunmen were scattering like rats, some throwing down weapons, others running for the hills. Those who resisted fell quickly to the precision of federal steel. Captain Rourke dismounted, boots sinking into the blood-soaked dirt. His eyes swept the carnage, taking in the smoldering rocks, the shattered ridge, and the girl standing at its edge. Wind tearing at her dress, a leather journal clutched in her hand. Sadie. She turned as he approached. Her sisters gathered behind her, bruised but standing. "I need to see that," Rourke said, voice softer now. Sadie handed him the book. He opened it. and his face changed. With every page, his jaw tightened, his hands trembled. When he closed it, he looked 10 years older. This is the end of Holloway, he said, behind him. Soldiers dragged the Baron from the wreckage, bleeding but alive, his coat torn, hat missing, boots scuffed. The empire he'd built on fear and silence crumbled in the face of 5 brave girls and 1 dead man who never stopped fighting. Sadie looked at the canyon wall. "Is he really gone?" she asked. Rourke followed her gaze to the landslide. "We'll dig," he promised. "If he's in there, we'll find him." Sadie nodded, tears finally falling, but they weren't just sorrow. They were thanks. They were peace. 6 months later, the McGraw ranch didn't look much like it used to. The house had been rebuilt stronger, wider, painted white with green shutters and a porch big enough for 6 rocking chairs. A new barn stood where the old one had burned. A proper fence lined the perimeter, and laughter now echoed where gunfire once rang. Elias stood on the porch, his left leg braced with iron, his right hand still stiff from nerve damage, but he was alive. Alive and watching 5 girls race across the yard, chasing a ragged ball through tall grass. Their dresses were clean, their faces brighter. The shadows behind their eyes hadn't vanished, but they'd been pushed back by sunshine and supper bells and safety. Sadie, now 15, helped Elias tend the ledger and oversee chores. Lila had taken to drawing her sketches lined the kitchen wall. June read everything she could get her hands on. Tessa talked to the chickens like they were neighbors. And Millie still carried that broken doll, now stitched tight with red thread and love. The journal had made its way to Washington, where it sparked inquiries, resignations, arrests. Holloway's name became poison. His fortune vanished, and the girls, they became symbols of truth. Of survival, of the kind of justice that takes root in blood. Elias rocked slowly in his chair, pipe unlit between his teeth. He didn't need the smoke anymore. He had air now, fresh, free. Sadie stepped onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed him one. They printed another article. She said we're heroes. Elias chuckled. "You are." She sat beside him. "We all are." He looked out over the field. "Never thought I'd be part of a family again. You didn't find us." Sadie said, "We found you." He nodded. "Luck o' me." The wind stirred the wheat. The sun dipped low, and on a porch in the heart of Texas, a broken man, once buried in grief, watched 5 orphan girls chase the future he'd nearly left behind. And, for the first time in years, Elias McGraw smiled without pain, because redemption doesn't come in glory. It comes in choosing to stand when everything inside says fall, and in loving again when you thought you never would. Warm, rugged voice with a hint of grit. If this story hit you right in the gut, if every shot fired, every tear shed, and Elias McGraw's sacrifice stirred something deep inside you, then don't you ride off just yet. Hit that subscribe button, partner, and saddle up for more tales from the unforgiven frontier where justice don't come from a courtroom, but from grit, gunpowder, and heart. Ring that notification bell to catch the next showdown the moment it drops. And hey, don't be a stranger, drop a comment below. Let me know what you felt, what you feared, what you're still thinking about. Because out here in the West, every voice echoes.